Welcome to the Resilient Surgeon, part of the STS Surgical Hot Topics podcast. Our goal with the Resilient Surgeon series is to inspire our colleagues to be their best selves in and out of the operating room, using scientifically proven tools and recovery strategies of the world's top performers. I'm Dr. Michael Maddaus, and in each episode, I will talk to game changers who will share evidence-based practices, real-world strategies, and their own personal stories and experiences to help you build your resilience and to help you be your best self no matter what. Our guest today on The Resilient Surgeon is Dr. Jonathan Clark, Professor of Management at the Alvarez College of Business at the University of Texas, San Antonio. And the topic is leadership, but not the usual kind of leadership that involves being the boss and in charge. These days, there is a great deal of attention on surgeon burnout and wellness, and the individual actions we can take to improve our mental and physical health. I personally am a huge advocate for our individual agency, and so much so that I wrote a review article for the Annals of Thoracic Surgery entitled The Resilience Bank Account that highlights individual habits that are so crucial for our well-being. But no matter how optimized your mental and physical health is, if one lives day after day in an environment that is rife with tension, lack of collective purpose, and a real sense of belonging, well, it can suck the life out of you bit by bit in a slow downward spiral. This is true whether we are talking about our home life or our work life. I am sure all of you listening can all recall times when you have been in a personal relationship or work environment where interactions have become transactional and real connection is absent. It's just no fun to walk in the door of work in the morning or home at night to relationships that are that way, transactional and devoid of connection. The bottom line is the culture of our personal lives and our work lives, especially our sense of belonging, has a massive impact on our mental and physical well-being. Our guest today will show us how a new leadership paradigm called leading through can radically transform the culture of any team or organization, all the way from a small family unit to a multinational corporation. It is a leadership paradigm based on seeing and empowering everyone to contribute in a way that exponentially grows our human potential and innovation, unlike the old legacy leadership paradigm of power over, dominated by rules and bureaucracy. I learned the principles of leading through the hard way, on my own and through a lot of trial and error. But I can state with absolute certainty that it has been transformational for my well-being, for the well-being of our family, and for how I show up in the world in general. And now I bring you Professor Jonathan Clark. Jonathan, welcome to the Resilient Surgeon, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I just want to point out why I feel your presence on this podcast is so important. And of course, it's your book Leading Through and all of your work in leadership and in the world of healthcare and in academics. But the real essence of why I'm so excited to have you on the podcast is because I've come to realize, we talk about resilience and there's an enormous amount of individual focus. You need to do this, you need to exercise, you need to do all these things. And that's great, but it's not so great if you're walking into a shitty work environment, right? One where you don't feel like you're valued, they don't care about you. You feel as if you're a cog in the machine. And that is why I'm so keen on really bringing this message of the power of thriving within our work environment on our overall well-being. And so that's the key message here from me and why you're here. And I just want to open with a couple of quotes from the book to highlight that. One of the people you highlight in the book is Bob Chapman, really an incredible man. And he says, and this is Barry Waymiller, a company, and after he went through some personal experiences with a marriage and divorce and waking up to how he was treating people, he shifted his entire focus on that organization. And he said, "We are now going to measure success by the way we touch the lives of everyone, meaning to lift, inspire, engage, and strengthen them." And the other quote is, "Thriving people create thriving organizations," all right? So there you are. Thriving
Yeah.
people create
Yeah.
thriving organizations, and it's true. And the final piece of the backdrop is I had another guest on the podcast, Mike Abrashoff, who is the author of It's Your Ship, a remarkable book about how he came from a command and control power over framework. And he realized that the outgoing captain was despised by his crew of 310 sailors. And he was in that moment like, I'm not going to let this happen to me. So he basically did everything that you're talking about in this book, but he just intuitively figured it out. And it turned that ship around in 2 years. It was the best ship in the Pacific Fleet. The retention rates, the re-enlistment rates went from 28% to 95% in the Navy. And it was literally a perfect example of the operationalizing of the material that's in Leading Through your book with your father and your sister. So I just wanted to say this is a perfect bookend to that podcast and that experience because you in this book and your father and sister have created such an incredible framework for this entire business of leading in a different way. And so that's the end of my long soapbox, standing on the
Right.
soapbox. Yeah, but it's I think it's an important framework to set up here. But tell us, you talk about power over versus leading through. What does power over mean, and how did you come to leading through as an alternative to this
Well,
paradigm of power
let me,
over?
can I just make a comment on something you just said?
Please make any comments as you
You,
want. Yeah.
you, we came to this book. We decided to write this book because we were observing so many instances of what you just described with the captain taking over the ship and it's miraculous what happens when you recognize the damaging influence of the power over paradigm and you choose to do something different.
Hmm.
It really is incredible. And we've been observing this now, if you include my dad's research experience, for more than almost 5 decades, just repeatedly over and over and over
Over and
and
over
over
and
and
over.
over.
Yeah.
My dad mostly in kind of manufacturing context, but other contexts as well. In my case, mostly in healthcare contexts and hospitals and physician groups. And in my sister's case, she's seen this in just about every industry you can imagine in her work
Hmm.
for Deloitte
Hmm.
Consulting. And so we wanted to codify it, right? Like ask what's really going on here and provide an answer to that question that is actionable, that people can put to use right away. And so that's where this book came from.
Yeah. Well, it's really a masterpiece. Yeah, I've read a lot of leadership books, and I would actually say this Leading Through as the that and It's Your Ship are almost the two books you need. One is hyper practical stories, the It's Your Ship, and yours is the entire framework of what he did that makes it all make sense.
Yeah. Yep. So to your question about power over, um, that like where this came from is a little bit nebulous, but you can trace its beginnings, its growth back to the industrial age
Mhm.
and the choices that the people running those companies made about how to operate. And it's just perpetuated over time. And the essence of the paradigm is the consolidation of power to just a few people. And then the exercise of that power, right? The use of that power to exert control over people, right? There's sort of this theory that we've developed that the way to get people to engage in unified effort, or the only way to do it, is through coercion.
Mhm. Mhm.
And the truth of the matter is you actually can do some things coercion, right? Coercion control can be effective for doing some things. The problem, and there's sort of a paradox in this theory that we've developed. There's a paradox that the more power you grasp for and consolidate, the less effective it becomes. And in fact, the power, even though you use the power over paradigm to control people, to get things done, to create unified effort, you are in fact creating a self-limiting system because of the nature of the paradigm. And again, that is a paradigm that is about exerting, executing through control and compliance,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? And that's the mindset, right? The mindset is compliance, and this has implications for people's agency, right? There's this view about people that if we give them agency in their work, it won't work out very well because people are inherently slothful or inherently
Lazy, they're not
lazy,
motivated. Yeah. Yeah.
and even more than that, even if they weren't inherently lazy, there's this sort of mindset that they wouldn't be able to do what they need to do without us,
Yes.
without
Yeah.
those in power.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's sort of the essence of the power over paradigm. Well, what that leads to is a whole apparatus aimed at exerting that control, right? And it includes things like very tall hierarchical structures, bureaucracies that are just full of rules. I mean, like binders of rules, you
As
know?
as David Brooks says, death by 1,000 paper
Yeah,
cuts.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what this creates. And it it gives a number of people, a small set of people in the organization, authority and power. And the primary means of creating that unified effort I was talking about before is direct supervision
Mm-hmm.
and watching people, and and again coercing them to do what you want them to do. So that's the essence of the power over paradigm.
And I love the way you frame the impact of power over versus leading through, and that is organizational darkness versus organizational light.
Yeah.
And power over leads to organizational darkness. Can you tell us what you mean by that idea?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So actually, I'll take a conceptual step back before
Mm-hmm.
I talk about light and darkness, because as we've conceptualized leadership, we sort of put a stake in the ground to say we believe leadership is always and everywhere a moral act.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason we say that is because leadership always emerges from moments of influence, right? Somebody gains influence by some means. It could be power, it could be something else, authority, position, could be just credibility, could be anything, a variety of things. But somebody finds themselves in that moment of influence, and in that moment they have a choice, right? They can, and they have an opportunity to influence people. They have a choice of how to use that influence, and that influence could be used for good ends or for bad ends, and that makes
Mm-hmm.
that choice,
Mm-hmm.
that leadership you exercise in that moment, always and everywhere a moral act. And we believe very
Yeah.
strongly that effective leaders always seek to do good and always seek to make things better for people.
There
So
is a key. I just want to highlight that.
yeah,
Always seek to make things better for
yep,
people. That is the imperative.
that's right.
It's
It
the
doesn't mean
imperative.
that they're always successful at it,
No, but
really,
their
but that's their
mission.
intention. That's their
Yes.
intent.
Yeah.
That's absolutely their intention. And so that means we believe that means that the people who are doing that work of leadership, and again, if you read the book, you'll understand that our view of leadership is not tied to position or authority, that anybody, in
Mm-hmm.
fact,
Mm-hmm.
the kinds of organizations where you see these miraculous outcomes that we were talking about before, leadership is everywhere in the organization.
Yeah.
So the people who are exercising that leadership, because it's always and everywhere a moral concern, those people need a moral context within which to do that work.
Yes.
Because there's always this kind of, tug of war between, the power and um and and opportunity to do the right thing, lure of doing the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so people need a moral context within which to um to that enables them to do good, to practice leadership in a way that makes things better for people. And and doing that requires that those leaders, the people doing that work, overcome what we call organizational darkness.
Mhm.
And darkness comes from things like attitudes and behaviors and practices that make seeing the right way forward and doing it more difficult. It's things like arrogance and bullying, exploitation, harass. You can think of, just
Criticism. I mean,
criticism, all sorts of things that generate what we call as organizational darkness. And the opposite is organizational light. And leaders create that light and need that light to do their work effectively. And that light guides and energizes people. I mean, just like regular light, right? The
yes.
physical light that we
Yeah.
experience every day, right? It guides us, it energizes us. We need the same thing metaphorically in our organizations and in our work with people. And it's sustained, that light is sustained by things like kindness and
Hmm.
generosity and
Hmm.
respect and love. Like,
Gratitude.
yeah,
Yes.
gratitude. Love is a word we use a lot. It's a central concept in the book, and it's a word that sometimes gets a reaction from people, when we use that word.
Oh yeah. Oh
The
yeah.
initial reaction from people is like, love in the workplace?
Yeah. What are you talking
What are you
about? I
talking
know it.
about?
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. Love creates
Yeah.
light. Yeah. So things like these things like love and shared purpose and kindness, these things create the light that provides the context that leaders need to do the right thing at the end of the day. So we refer to the ability, this moral context and the ability that it creates to do the right thing because it's the right thing even when it's hard. We refer to that as
Hmm.
the soul. That's the
Hmm.
soul of leader.
Yes. Yeah.
And it really is about creating a collective ability to do the right thing because it's the right thing even when it's hard.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that happens a lot, it turns out, because there is this always constantly this organizational darkness kind of knocking at the door, wanting to
Uh,
drive
I
those
think
leaders.
even in my head,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
as an individual, it's
Yeah,
always lurking in the background, trying to seep
right.
its way in. To judge, criticize, all the things, these human tendencies. They're so pervasive.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons actually why the power over paradigm, uh, it perpetuates
Yeah.
so easily is because unless it's almost like a human default option.
Yeah. It really is. It really
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Unless you're
And
being very deliberate and intentional about what we call leading through
mhm,
and creating this light and driving out the darkness. I think it was Martin Luther King who said, the only thing that can drive out darkness is light.
it's light. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Darkness cannot drive out darkness.
No.
Only light can do that.
And there would have been a time when I would have been listening to this, and you would have used the word love as you did, and I would have been like,
What?
"Man, are you serious? I got shit to do, man. I don't time for all that." No, I'm serious. There's no
Yeah.
question about it.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, I might have been like, interesting, but I got stuff to do. I got things to get done. But I just want to highlight the importance of that. And you said in the book that what you mean by love is a combination of attention to people,
Yep.
appreciation,
Yep.
affection, and affection. You can show affection in the workplace. You
Oh,
can
yeah.
absolutely do
Absolutely.
that.
Yep.
And acceptance of who they are as an individual. All right. So those are the four A's, if you will. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and and just to really put the stamp on this, Alan Mulally, the famous CEO of Ford, who turned that company around from 17 billion loss the first year to becoming profitable without a government bailout, in his working principles, which in many ways I think he almost again codifies leading through in so many ways of his working principles. But the first one is people first, love
Yeah.
them up, and he's got a
Yeah.
heart there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, here's a
Yep.
serious big time CEO with a
Yeah.
heart and talking
Yeah.
about loving his people up.
Yep. Yep. Another example of that would be Herb Kelleher, who was the founder of
Yep,
Southwest Airlines.
yep,
In fact,
yep.
LUV is their stock symbol now.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
LUV.
Yeah,
And of course, the heart and all that is very central
yeah,
to their
yeah,
brand. But he
yeah.
had he had a very, I mean, he was very explicit about his theory of business, right? He said, look, if we love and care for our people will love and care for our customers.
They will.
And in turn, in a way, our customers will love and care for our shareholders.
Yes. And they will. It's a
Right?
in
Yeah.
many ways it's this the virtuous circle that you
Yeah.
talk about in the book. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to hit on the soul and the heart and the mind of leadership. So you talk about three core what would you call them?
Metaphors. They're metaphors.
Metaphors
Yeah.
for what people need to develop to help lead and help others lead
Yeah.
through. And
Yeah.
if you could go through those, the
Yeah.
soul, starting with the soul and then the heart and the mind.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly, I mean, what you just described, the words you just used are almost exactly how we describe it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
these are metaphors to help people understand what great leadership looks like. And we've already talked about the soul, right? The soul is really
Mhm.
about this moral dimension
The
of
moral
leadership
context. Yeah.
and the need for a moral context and organizational darkness and light and the role of leaders in create and there's really, it's not an abstract thing. It really is something that you have to work at, and it takes work, right? And we use a framework called the cycle that we call the cycle of virtue,
Hmm.
help people see what that work looks like, and it involves learning yourself and helping others to learn what we call moral discernment, right? This is the ability to kind of understand the difference between right and wrong, right?
Hmm.
And it's in many ways there are values that are universal no matter what setting you are, but there are other values and things that you need to understand given the context in which you're operating, right?
Hmm.
Moral discernment involves both of those things, right? And it's a skill. It's not easy to always discern, you know, what the right thing to do is. And so there's effort and work involved in building that skill. And then knowing is not enough, right? You also have to put it into action. You have
Put
to
it into
do it,
action.
right?
Yeah.
And we call the ability to put those what you know, what you've done into action, moral discipline.
Hmm.
And leaders play a really important role in both helping people develop both of those skills. And one of my mentors, Clay Christensen,
Hmm.
um, he liked to say it's much easier. He would tell these great stories about experiences he had. He was tempted to give up his values just once, just this
Just
once,
once, just this one time.
this one
Yes.
time. And he just liked to say, look, repeatedly over and over in my life, I've learned it is much easier for me to live my values 100% of the time than it is to live them 99% of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so that's kind of what the cycle of virtue is all about, is helping people to have that moral discernment and moral discipline. And that creates virtue, which we think of as, the strength and power of moral excellence. And that's the
And
skill of leadership.
yeah, and I just want to emphasize the crucial meaning of the title of your book here, Leading Through.
Mm.
And in this moment, we can talk about these values of kindness, caring, loyalty, all that. But what you're talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the leader taking the role of infusing that throughout the organization, whether it's my family or whether it's 10,000 people,
Yeah,
and creating leaders all throughout the organization that
exactly
that
right.
are part of that moral context and have the moral discipline. That is the ultimate big time first step for the
Yep.
leader. Is
Yep.
that correct?
That's
Yeah.
that's exactly right. Yeah, we
Yeah.
we use the phrase leadership that permeates.
Permeates. Yes.
Permeate. You want leadership
Yeah.
to permeate the entire organization.
And
Yeah.
I really want to emphasize this too. And you talk about the soul of the leader, and it's a spiritual journey. Okay. Now that again, like love can be, what are you talking about here? Are we
Yep.
talking about the
Yep.
Catholic
Yep.
Church or what are we
Yeah. Yeah.
talking about
Right.
now?
Right. Right.
But really, and I buy into this fully. And you talk about it's the human need for purpose meaning, and connection. That is a spiritual journey.
That's what we mean by spiritual journey. And it certainly can, come from a religious context, right? But
Of course. Yeah.
it doesn't have to. It can come from whatever it is that helps you to have that experience, that what we
Right.
call spiritual
Right.
experience. Whatever it is, do it.
But what a shift
Yeah.
as a leader to think of one of your major roles is to fulfill people's help them fulfill
Yeah.
a spiritual journey of meaning, purpose,
Yeah.
and connection. I mean,
Yeah.
it's remarkable.
And it's so powerful. And that in fact, that is the last element. It's sort of the overarching element of the soul of leadership, which is animating, right? The
Hmm.
values and
Hmm.
what we're trying to accomplish in our organization with meaning and purpose.
Yes. Yeah.
And that can be so powerful for people.
Well, it is. I mean, it's so uplifting. I'm sure anyone listening to this can recall times when they've been in such an environment where you felt valued, appreciated. It gives you meaning and a sense of purpose. I mean, my daughter just got laid off partly from a job that she had felt so much purpose and meaning for her. And it was devastating, because of how much it meant to her. And that's what we really want
Yeah,
in our
we
folks,
do. Yep, we do. We
So
do.
then the next piece is the heart of
The
leadership.
heart of leadership and
Yeah.
and love. Love is the essence of the heart of
That's
leadership.
the number one thing. Yeah.
It's the number
Yeah.
one thing. And you talked about the four A's of love. I mean, I think the four A's, for me, we didn't develop those four A's. There's several other scholars who have developed those ideas, and actually for me, those four A's have helped me to both experience more love myself in my life,
Mm-hmm.
but also
Mm-hmm.
learn how to give it to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's like it helps me to operationalize love
Yeah.
in my
Yeah.
life, you know,
Yeah.
brings it to a practical level. But love's not the only thing, and the heart of leadership really is about helping people to thrive. And we've developed a framework. We call it the Live framework,
Mm-hmm.
to help leaders understand what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And live
Mm-hmm.
live is an acronym that stands for love. Love's first. Inspiration, vitality. Vitality is what we mean by vitality is sort of emotional and physical and mental energy and health and
Mm-hmm.
strength. And then
Which is amplified by purpose and meaning, right?
exactly,
So
and
that the
all
vitality is they're
exactly.
all linked together.
They're all linked
It's
together. This is
yeah.
these are not exclusive, mutually exclusive
No.
things. These are all very tightly
Yeah.
intertwined elements. And that the last element, the E in live, is expression. And we think of expression as coming in at least two forms. There's probably more, but at least two forms that are really crucial to people's experience at work. One is voice, their ability to give voice to their ideas and contribute to solving problems.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is
Mm-hmm.
creativity
Mm-hmm.
and the opportunity to create. I think there's almost this innate need that people have to
Very
create something,
powerful. Very
to create
powerful.
something. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Innate, literally, not only to be a part of something where your ideas and voice is heard, as a human collective. I mean, that's
Right.
kind of our origin,
Yeah,
but then the desire to create is
yeah,
extraordinary. And it's been shown how critical that is for our mental health, the
yeah.
creative side of things. Yeah.
Right. So this framework, this live framework, it can be used both as a sort of diagnostic tool, right? If you feel like your people are disengaged and
Mm-hmm.
or you feel disengaged and you're just struggling at work, just think about this framework. And
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
love. Do you have love at work? Are you inspired? Are you burned out, right? Do you have
Mm-hmm.
vitality in your work? And to what extent are you giving expression to your ideas and your talents? And so it's a diagnostic tool, but also a tool to help leaders know what are the things I need to be attending to as I work with people, as I work with other people. And so these are also things that you need to give. You need to give to other people, help other people to experience at work.
Yeah. So, okay, this is interesting. So let's say I'm feeling fried. I don't feel loved. I don't feel inspired. my personal energy is down. I don't feel like my voice is heard. Some people would say maybe it's time to leave the organization,
Yep.
and that might be a viable and real option.
Yep. Yep.
Other people, I know of one surgeon who, because of personal circumstances, really cannot leave the environment, the city that they're in, and that sort of thing. So they have other constraints.
Yep.
Do you feel it's possible to go in and start this leadership process? This is what Simon Sinek would seem to say, that you start with your own small tribe
Yep.
and start generating the light, as you would call
Yep.
it.
Yep.
What are your thoughts about
I
that?
agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Mm-hmm.
This can be, you can embrace this kind of, you can embrace the live framework no matter what kind of organization you work in. We
At
all
what
have
level?
relationships with other people at
Yeah,
work. We can choose to practice live in our sphere of influence, no matter what organization we belong to. But we can also, I mean, we can also exercise leadership, right? Take the
yes,
opportunity to identify the problem for people. If we never speak up and we never say, I'm suffering, I'm burned out, and so are,
yes, yeah,
90% of my colleagues,
yeah,
then you're not giving the people who are creating that environment an opportunity to change, and that
yeah,
needs to happen. And unfortunately, in healthcare, that's happened a lot.
uh-huh, yeah,
People speak up and say, I'm burned out. Hey, hello,
yeah,
I'm burned out, and nothing happens.
and nothing is happening.
Nothing
Yeah,
is happening. And I think that's actually why we're seeing in healthcare a trend towards unionization of physicians. In fact,
mm-hmm.
just recently, Mass General Brigham in Boston announced that you know their physicians had voted to move in the direction of unionization because
Wow, yeah,
just they've and this is like a major health system, an academic health system, right? Because they feel burned out, they feel like the power over paradigm. That's not what they called it, but that's what it is. The power over paradigm is preventing them from having the autonomy they need to control the relationship between the doctor and the patient. And anyway, so these are, I think this is we can view that uh, as an attempt by these physicians to change their workplace.
yeah. It's kind of saddens me. I'm pleased that they're advocating, but it saddens me that it's like that.
Yeah, I
Um,
totally agree. And it's hard. Who knows if this is the right solution or not,
right.
right?
Because it's like the unions the unions were necessary to stop the organizational darkness in the early days of,
Right.
the automotive industry and industrial manufacturing. It was
Yep.
it was the only
Yep.
tool they had to stop the coercive nature of power over leadership.
Yep. Yep.
And really, it's just recapitulating here, it seems, in the healthcare
Yeah.
world.
And in fact, my dad spent the early part of his career studying labor unions, and
Hmm.
and I think
Hmm.
I think he would say that, yeah, the unions did a lot of good early on, but eventually what happened was the power over paradigm creeped into the unions.
Crept right into them. Yeah, yeah,
And so it's sort of like the power over paradigm co-opting the critics.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then now this one is important, and it's mind. That's the final of
Yeah.
the three,
Yeah.
and I actually sort of chastised my audience a little bit at Colorado, and I said, I think we're all too much in our heads.
Mhm.
We're
Mhm.
not enough in our hearts.
Yeah.
It's ironic. We
True.
we show our hearts with our patients, but not with each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so tell us about the mind part of this paradigm.
Well, the mind of leadership recognizes that leadership, as we think of it, and our definition of leadership really focuses on leadership as a work, right? Leadership is the work we
Mhm,
do to mobilize other people to make things better.
mhm.
And it's
Can you
work.
just restate that? Because I think
Yeah.
it's really crucial. This
Yeah.
is this is the
So,
heart of the book.
leadership is the work that mobilizes people to make things better. That's kind of our short form definition. There's a
Hmm.
longer
Hmm.
form that's a little more detailed, but that's the essence of it. And it is work, and there's a lot. It it requires that we use our minds
Yes.
very
Yes.
carefully. There's a lot of decision making to
Carefully,
be done,
carefully.
and
Yes.
analysis, decision making, problem solving, and that's a big part of leadership. But what we have found in our study of the mind of leadership is that it follows a process, and we call it the leadership process,
Hmm.
and it involves things like systems thinking and building teams and building networks of partners and empowering other people. But what we've seen is that all throughout that process, it's really not about the mind of the individual leader. It's about the collective mind,
Yeah.
right? And great leaders recognize, I don't have all the answers. I don't have everything I need to solve this problem or to pursue this opportunity all right here in my own head. And I need to socialize that idea with other people and get other people's perspectives and give other people an opportunity to contribute to making things better. And so it's really as much about the collective mind as it is about the individual mind of the leader.
You know, this this brings up some experiences I had as in a leadership position that, almost now in the context of this conversation are embarrassing. You know, but you're talking about collective intelligence here, and you use the word teams, but teams are the foundational unit of how to get this done.
That's right.
The mind part, right? Do you want to
That's
talk
right.
about that a little bit? The team aspect of this.
Yeah. So we believe that leadership is often thought of as a personal thing, right? It's about the individual leader, the individual person following the leader. And absolutely that's true, right? That's a big part of leadership. But we also believe leadership is organizational.
Mhm.
And the kind of leadership you get and getting leadership that truly does permeate an organization depends on the context that organization creates. And in the power over paradigm, right, the context that's created is
Mhm.
very, very hierarchical, very, very bureaucratic. But at the end of the day, the work of any organization is done by people, cross-functional groups of people working and collaborating and cooperating with each other. And our research and experience has taught us repeatedly over time. Richard Hackman, professor at Harvard, passed away a few years ago, built an entire career on showing this, that the best way to do that is in teams, is to use teams. And others like Jeff Pfeffer have kind of been preaching that tune, that look, the most effective organizations make teams the fundamental unit of the organization.
Not departments,
Not
it's
departments,
teams.
it's
Yeah.
teams. It's
Yeah.
teams working cross-functionally to collaborate, cooperate to make things better. And now there are others who are, helping us understand what that looks like. People like Amy Edmondson at Harvard, Melissa
Yes. Yes.
Valentine at
Yes.
Stanford, who are
Yeah.
like helping us to see what is it, they use the term teaming. We use that a little bit in the
Hmm.
book too, right? But that's
Hmm.
just sort of the process of
Yeah.
making teams work effectively. So that's what we mean, right? Like in order to create the kind of environment where leadership can permeate the entire organization, you need to make teams the fundamental unit of how the
Hmm.
organization works.
Hmm. I think we've covered a fairly good sense of what leading through is about. Is there anything you want to add before I hope to go to a couple of practical examples of how
Well,
this plays out?
building on what I just said about teams, the leading through paradigm on the organizational side, the leading through paradigm, when you're successful at making teams the fundamental unit of the organization, that enables you to do a whole host of things structurally that kind of break down the power over paradigm, right? So if
Hmm.
you have
Hmm.
teams of people who are collaborating and coordinating and doing it all on their own in a decentralized way, you don't need all that hierarchy.
Yeah, no, I know.
You can get rid
Yeah,
of
you
all
just
those
don't need
rules
it.
and that bureaucracy. It just
Yeah.
not becomes unnecessary. Now, I wouldn't say that we're part of the bureaucracy busting movement, per se, because, there are some things for which rules
You
and
need it. Yeah.
procedures are necessary, right? So it's not about eliminating bureaucracy or eliminating hierarchy altogether. It's about getting the hierarchy right and putting it in its right place, right? Hierarchy
Hmm.
and bureaucracy should be means to an end. They should be there to
Yes.
support the teams, to support people in doing their work, not to coerce them, not
Yeah.
to control them. But making teams the fundamental unit of the organization enables that to happen. The other thing that I'll say is that one of the things that causes the power over paradigm to perpetuate is the perceived tug of war that most organizations face between giving people more freedom, people and teams more freedom, freedom of action, right? Freedom to figure out how to solve their problems and do their work. The tug of war between that and unity, right? And ensuring that what we're doing in the organization, all the work that's happening is unified.
Yeah. It's just not a bunch of chaotic nonsense. Yes.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
most people approach those two things as if they are in a tug of war, and there is no question about it that the power over paradigm puts them into that position against each other.
Yeah.
That freedom and unity can't coexist, and therefore we're going to choose unity.
Hmm.
We're
Hmm.
going to let go of this freedom.
Because we have to. We quote have
Have
to.
to.
Yeah.
We have to.
Yeah.
We have to. But it's just not the case. I mean, there's just so, my dad's research on modularity, an idea that we use to help frame what a leading through organization looks like. Modularity has enabled, the development of all the technologies we embrace and love today.
Hmm.
And the vast majority of those technologies have been developed by people working independently in a unified way, right? And
Hmm.
there are just certain
Hmm.
conditions and things that need to be put in place to make that happen. And so we that's part of what we enumerate in the book is what are those conditions? What do they look like? And how do you make that happen?
And that's what you're talking about in terms of you don't eliminate hierarchy. You don't eliminate it all. You need structure and
Yep. Yep.
in place to allow that flourishing and thriving and ideation and creativity and human potential to
Yeah.
really grow.
Yep. 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 And when that
Yeah,
happens, what you get is what I said before, leadership that permeates, right? Everybody,
permeates.
everybody
Yeah,
taking responsibility to make
yeah,
things better in the
yeah,
organization.
yeah. Almost a perfect quote for this moment. And I remember uh, after a talk I gave, one of the surgeons said, "Well, what do we do about accountability here?" And there's a Jocko Willink is a famous Navy SEAL,
Yeah.
kind of a leadership guru too, and he's really singing many of the same songs that you are in this book. And he had a great video about accountability. He said, real accountability is when people care.
Yeah.
All
That's
right.
right.
You don't need rules. You need
Yep.
people to
Yep.
care about
Yep.
you, about the mission, about the
Yep.
organization.
Yep. Yep. And
It,
and what you get when that happens is really incredible.
it's incredible. As you say, it's magic. It is magic.
Magic. It's magic. And it's a different mindset though, right? I mean, I talked about the mindset before. The power over paradigm mindset is very focused on control through
Hmm.
compliance.
Hmm.
And leading through, you shift away from that and you embrace a mindset that focuses on innovation through commitment and
Hmm.
initiative, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Your focus is on getting people who are committed to what you're doing.
Yes.
Who are committed to what you're doing requires that you care about them.
Yes.
Really care about them, right? Not just instrumentally care about them. Like I care about you because you'll do what I want you to do.
Yeah.
You
No.
really care
Yeah.
about them, not just at work, but you care about them. Like, how does work fit in your? Am I ruined? Actually, Clay Christensen once told me a story where he started a company called Ceramics Processing early in his career before he was an academic, and he woke up one day and realized all the employees, many of the employees that he was working with were going home miserable at the end of the day.
Mhm.
And he just like, oh, it was an epiphany for him, right?
Yeah. It's a
Like
moment. Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
doing it, we're doing it wrong. we're
Yeah.
doing it wrong. You know, we need to actually care about how these people feel
Yes.
when they go home, and the role that our work environment is playing in their life, right?
Where they
Not
spend most of their days, most of their
exactly.
time, all their hours. Yeah.
That's right. So you need
Yeah.
to really care about, and when people get that sense that you really care about them, they're going to be super.
It is magic.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that you hit on the issue of feeling. How do we feel? You know, and part of the surgical training in many ways is you have to beat that out of yourself in some
Oh,
ways. I mean,
yeah.
you've got to be able to,
Oh,
you know, it, just do the work,
yeah.
but
Yep.
like anything, it's good until it's not. And so to be able to toggle between that and caring about how people feel,
Yeah.
that's the key, in my opinion. And because the world has become so transactional, and
Yep.
we
Yep.
treat each other in a transactional way, and it's terrible for all of us.
That's right. And I don't think there's any more grueling workplace than surgical residency.
Yeah,
I mean, I
it's
can't
it's
think of
rough.
one. I mean, it's so hard. I mean, I mean, it's. I mean, obviously, you want people who are training to be surgeons to be focused on the technical aspects of, and
Yeah.
it's super hard. It's not easy, and it involves your mind and your body and your dexterity with your hands, and it's grueling. But on top of that, we create these work environments in which this training is happening that are just
hmm hmm
damaging,
Yeah.
damaging for
Yeah.
people. Not
Yeah.
only in, the kind of cultural aspects of how those environments work, but also like, how many hours we're having these people work. And, I knew we had a book to write
Mhm.
when years ago, my sister, who was really kind of the driving force behind developing the live framework, she had gone through some really hard times herself personally, and and we're thinking about how we're always thinking about leadership because that's kind of the work
Mhm.
we did, but she was
Yeah.
thinking about how can I apply these things in my life and to make things better, and the live framework is what came out of that. And I remember and we had talked about it, and conceptually and before, but it wasn't until she sent me this email. She sent me this email. It's probably going on 7 or 8 years ago, where she had created this little form with the elements of the live framework and their definition, and a place where you can set goals in each of those categories.
Mhm.
She sent this to me right around New Year's Eve, and I used it as a framework to try to change my own life
Yeah.
for over the next year. And I literally I printed it out, and I taped it on my mirror in my bathroom.
Love it. Yeah.
Wrote stuff on it, and then I would make notes over time, and it worked.
It worked.
It
Yes.
worked. It made my life so much better. And I
Yeah.
knew when having tested it myself, I said,
Yes. Yes.
we got
Yes.
to share
Yes.
this. We need to share this with the world. This needs to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
shared with the world. So,
And really, I honestly view this as
mm,
waking up to our human potential, our
yeah.
our human connectedness, waking up
Yep.
to a different way of being in the world.
Yeah, we often talk about what we're trying to do with this book and with the work that we're now starting to do with organizations.
Mhm.
We often talk about that as an effort to bring humanity back
Yes.
to the workplace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, a simple idea, right? That makes sense. Anybody can. Oh yeah, that sounds so great. But like making it happen is very hard, very difficult.
That's almost the perfect moment here because I just want to emphasize, like anything worthwhile in life, if it's easy, it's probably not such a good thing, you know. But
Yeah,
doing hard things and this work, I can promise you, if anybody's listening and they take these things seriously and really go after it, both at work in a small way, a big way, at home, it will be life changing. It will be life changing.
yeah,
More than another trip to the gym or whatever, it will be life changing.
yeah. Agreed, 100%. I've seen it over and over and over.
Yeah.
I've seen people just, I mean, just
Transform.
It's magic.
Yeah, it is magic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jonathan, where can people reach you? You mentioned consulting work. I mean, what are some things you would tell
Sure.
people if they want to look you up and work?
People can find me on LinkedIn and reach out to me through there. They
Mhm.
can also go to our website. We have a website for the book called leadingthrough.co. So not
Yeah.
.com, .co, leadingthrough.co. And you can reach me through the website too.
All right, great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And for not just being on the podcast, but for the incredible work that you and your family have done to bring this to light. And I use the
Well,
word light intentionally. Yeah.
thank you. Thank you. And I sure appreciate you having me on. And
This has been The Resilient Surgeon, a podcast brought to you by the Society of Thoracic Surgeons. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this podcast, please rate it 5 stars and let your friends, trainees, and colleagues know about it. On social media, you can use the hashtag #BeYourBestSelf. More information about the Society of Thoracic Surgeons is available online at sts.org.